This lost account of the Pied Piper of Hamelin from 1284 was recently discovered in an old monastery in Lower Saxony, Germany. It reveals what happened in those fateful weeks. It has not been translated into English until now. The people's reaction to all that has happened is maddening. I was there. I saw what he made those children do. No one believes me. The mayor's men are after me. I pray that someone will heed these words so that this horrible crime is never forgotten. Sometimes the worst creatures are those who appear to be virtuous. My name is Marcel, and I am 13 years of age. I have lived in Hamelin my entire life. Hamelin was a wonderful town to live in. Quaint homes lined the cobblestone streets. The markets were always bustling with people. You could hear the happy laughter of children playing. I recall my parents grumbling from time to time about how expensive things were, but Hamelin was a great place to live. Flanking Hamelin is the Westner River, with its banks so wide and tall. The people loved to fish and sail in its waters. The city's walls felt so safe and secure, capable of keeping any giant or monster out. We never could have foreseen that they would fall to a much smaller infiltrator. One day the rats suddenly appeared without warning. They spread so quickly before anyone could react. Those vermin infested every aspect of our lives. They were in our basements and on our dining room tables. No meal was left unspoiled. Jars and pots would contain drowned rats. People began to get sick, and the rats would not stop biting. And that chittering noise, you could hear it coming from within the walls. In the midst of this terror, our leadership was largely absent. There were decrees sent out suggesting that we simply trap the rats. There were far too many rats, and very few people with means to trap them. Their other action was to send out rations of dried beans for the people. They didn't look like any beans I'd ever seen before, and they didn't always boil very well. I never liked beans anyway, so I never ate them, but it wasn't enough to sit around eating beans. Something had to be done about the rats. As days turned to weeks, the townsfolk who had not fallen ill from the infestation were up in arms with this dramatic turn of fortune. There were talks of rebellion. Many of the men began speaking openly of marching upon the mayor's mansion. A date to march was set for the following day. They vowed they would gather as the noon church bells rang. I begged my father to let me go with him. He said nothing in reply, simply going out the door as the first bell sounded. I followed behind him. With the bells continuing to ring, the people gathered in the town square. The bells sounded familiar, but not entirely the same. I assumed that a vigilante had climbed the church steeple to keep them ringing. Hundreds of men were gathered in the town square, with torches and tools drawn. Justice for our people, destroy the rats, save the children, they chanted. The people formed a massive anger aimed in the direction of the mayor's estate. The people kicked and hacked at any rats in their path. They continued to chant for a solution. They wanted blood. The crowd gathered at the iron gates of the mayor's estate. His guards were assembled within, rigidly clutching their pikes. Mayor Ernst presented himself at a balcony above his gilded front doors. He was a heavier man, surely having no problem acquiring unspoiled food, splendidly adorned in medals and jewelry awarded from a ceremony unknown to me. "My beautiful people," he exclaimed, "it has come to my attention that you are upset with current events. Have you people heeded my proclamation? Have you not tried to trap the rats? Surely they are not so hard to catch." There were grumbles in the crowd. They were beginning to grow restless. The rats scurried beneath their feet, seemingly unbothered by all the commotion. "Please calm yourselves, for I have found a man who can help us. Please, introduce yourself." From the shadows behind the mayor, a man emerged. He was a tall, thin man with jagged features. He wore a small hat that came to a point, but no hair fell from beneath it. His cloak was long and gave off a metallic sheen, sometimes of bronze and sometimes of silver in the light, as if adorned with scales. The crowd was perplexed. Was this a warrior of some kind? A mystic? "You poor people," the strange man spoke. "Your good mayor has informed me of your plight. I am most sympathetic. I know of a way to get rid of these rats." He slid his hand into his cloak and drew out what looked like an ivory flute. He brought it to his lips and began to play. The notes he played were most peculiar. They were unlike any song I had ever heard, rapid high-pitched notes, very rhythmic. As he played, the rats that were scurrying among us suddenly froze. They were so still as if not even breathing. As the music continued, they turned their attention to the mysterious player. The mob was completely astonished, some even lowering the weapons in their hands. The anger and frustration that had built up was evaporating. The rats now began moving towards the balcony. They formed a large circling mass. Then the rats formed into smaller groups and began spinning together. This was all done while the rats made no noise. We could only hear the sound of their shuffling and pitter-patter of their small feet. Eventually, the crowd began to understand the purpose of this strange demonstration. The rats began to move more slowly, until they couldn't anymore. Rats in these clusters had become tangled together by their tails. It looked like it must have hurt, but the rats remained silent. Then the flute player stopped playing. "Now, guards, if you would be so kind." The guards at the gates began to back away slowly. "The people are fine now, don't worry," said the mayor. The guards moved to surround the clusters of rats. "At the ready." The guards raised their pikes. "Exterminate those vermin," screamed the mayor. At once, the guards let their pikes fall. They hacked at the mice. Their gurgled squeaks were horrible. Despite all of the misery that they had caused us, it was hard to stomach the carnage I was witnessing. And yet, despite this disgusting display, the crowd cheered. Clapping and whooping rang out. People were crying and hugging each other. It was as if the mayor had announced a new holiday. Above the jubilation, a voice piped up. "Shall we call you the Rat King, stranger?" This was accompanied by some good-humored chuckles. The strange flutist began to smile. "Ah, you people may call me the Pied Piper." For the next few hours you could hear those high, shrill notes echoing in every part of the city. His face expressionless, his cloak shimmering as he walked through the streets behind the thousands of rats. The rats were just drawn to him, falling out of windows in his direction. The children began to revere him as some kind of god, so they happily cleaned the leftover rats that had been left behind. The rats would form more swirling clusters, or simply be commanded to drown themselves in the Western River. This didn't seem to bother the people much. "Ah, well, their little bodies will just float downstream," people would say. In fact, this demonstration had seemingly done enough to ease people's fears. No one asked the Pied Piper where he came from, or what he wanted, or how was it that he was able to control the rats the way that he did. All the people cared about were results, and the Pied Piper was delivering. It could take years for people to pick up the pieces of their broken lives, but now, at least the rats were gone. No agreement had been struck about how this mysterious stranger was to be compensated. No vote ever cast, no decree from the mayor. The people had no say in the stranger's interference, and he never brought up a sum. We simply went along with the music, as it were. After all of the cleaning had been done, the mayor announced the celebration. The procession was of men, women, and children. The mood was much happier this time. We met in front of the mayor's gates again. The eyes of the mayor and the Pied Piper watched all of us from the balcony as the people gathered at the mayor's front gate. "We're so glad that all of you could join us for this exciting announcement," the mayor said. "Nothing is ever free. The Pied Piper has made a simple request in exchange for his services." "Yes," the Pied Piper replied. "I will be taking your children now." This announcement was so sudden and bizarre. The crowd began to gasp and scream. Some were pushing over others to get away from the mansion. Then the Pied Piper started playing. People's faces began to freeze. They became stone-faced as if statues. I couldn't understand how he was doing this. I thought he could only control the rats. In between the shrill notes of the flute, I could hear the mayor cackling with glee. I looked among the crowd. Almost everyone was in a daze. Most didn't seem to notice or care. I regret saying nothing at the time, but now I know that it wouldn't have mattered. Then I realized that I had no choice but to join the children as well, lest I be found out as having my own free will. The Pied Piper jumped down from the balcony, landing in front of the mansion gates. The children began to form a line procession. I quickly looked for a spot in line I could squeeze into. Then he played a different note. All at once the children raised their left arms in the air, mirrored by their right arms. All of them began clapping in perfect unison. Was he mocking us? I tried to play along as best as I could. Then the line began to march. I feared the Pied Piper would send all of the children to be drowned in the Westerner, but sadly, he had worse plans for them. We marched through the city gates. Soon we were out of sight of the townsfolk. No one tried to follow us. No one tried to stop us. The Pied Piper played a few different notes, and the line relaxed into a larger crowd, similar to army ranks. We continued to walk along the dirt road. Not far from Hamelin is a wooded area, sometimes known to be a favorite spot for brigands and bandits. Lots of animals lived there too, but no birds sang as we marched past. There was an occasional squirrel or fox on the ground. Different children would suddenly break ranks and run towards any creature in sight. Any poor unfortunate soul who was in their path was torn to shreds by the child's bare hands, or gnashed in their teeth. They would then return to their place in the marching ranks as if nothing had happened, along with a new gore painting their face and clothes. It reminded me of the mob that had marched to the mayor's mansion days before. Then we came to a small mountain. There looked to be a new cave in one spot I did not recall seeing before. The children continued in. There was no light, but they kept going. I just tried to keep pace, but could hardly see the child in front of me. Then I could see a faint light up ahead with a reddish glow. The procession came to a stop. We were standing on a ledge in a large open room. Below us was a wide expanse of liquid fire. In the middle of this expanse was a stone pillar, and atop that stood a strange statue. A statue of black basalt, horned with red eyes. It appeared to be depicting a foreign god. "We have arrived," the Pied Piper said to no one in particular. There was no response. The children just continued staring blankly ahead. Their eyes appeared completely black in the faint red light. Then he began playing his flute again. The children continued to march. I became even more horrified. There was nowhere left to go but the edge of the cliff. He intended to march the children to their doom into that fiery pit. I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. I screamed, "Stop! He means to kill us! Stop marching and flee! Go back home! The Pied Piper is a madman!" The playing stopped, but the children didn't. The Pied Piper began to laugh. They fell into the pit silently, as the rats when they were hacked to pieces. I'm not sure if the lack of screams made it worse. All I could hear was the whooshing sound of each child being engulfed in the flames. I couldn't bear to watch. I turned and ran as fast as I could go. I ran past the Pied Piper as he continued to play. He didn't try to stop me. His eyes only followed. He winked as I ran past. I kept running until I reached Hamelin. Day had turned to dusk after the long march. I knew the gate was about to close for the night. Guards stood by the city gate. The guards looked confused as to why I was back, as if they didn't expect me to return. I pushed my way between them, but they didn't try to stop me. Once I was behind their backs, I ran home. When I arrived, my mother and father just sat at the kitchen table staring blankly ahead. They didn't acknowledge my return. I ran up to my room and shut the door. Every hour the guards arrive. They knock on the front door and call for me to come out. If I don't reply after 5 minutes, they leave. My parents still haven't removed from the table. I still can't believe what has happened. All the youth of Hamelin, from 6 to 16, lost. Our town's future. Many of my schoolmates are gone. Now the streets will remain silent forever. The cycle has continued. I haven't slept. I don't know how much longer I can continue to live like this. Since the knocking has kept me up, I decided to write down everything that has happened. I've been famished since I returned last night. I scoured the house, but all we had left were those rations. I decided to eat them even though I hate beans. Now, I hear a distant fluting up the street. I hear the front door opening. There are footsteps coming up the stairs. Now a gentle knock on my bedroom door. I hear a familiar voice calling. He's saying, "Open up, boy. You didn't hear the end of my song." I think I will let him in. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing. And remember, nothing's lost forever.